Hello and welcome. I'm Ashley of The Ugly Sheep, and today we're going to make some shorts. So I generally don't like shorts. I've never found a pair that really fits and is comfortable for me unless they're like athletic shorts. But I want shorts that look nice to go out. And so I'm going to make shorts from this cloth that's my favorite color. Have I ever made shorts? No. Have I ever made pants at all? No. So we are going to do a mock-up just so that I can see how they feel, see what adjustments I need to make. And I do have the tools to measure the area that I need along the crotch seam so that I can adjust that, because I have a feeling that's a lot of where I have problems. So the first thing we need to do is to get the pattern together. And this pattern is one of the free patterns from Mood, and I will drop a link to it in the description. So let's go get started. After taping together the pattern, I did initially make a mock-up. The mock-up was 2 sizes too small at least, and what I probably should have done was made a second mock-up, but I didn't do that. Instead, what I did was I cut out the waistband of the size that I thought I should be based on the mock-up and did a quick check to see if it fit. Hindsight, that wasn't the best idea, but that's the direction I took after the mock-up. And so everything you're about to see is actually the first iteration of the shorts in the actual shorts material instead of the mock-up material. But I did end up taking that apart, cutting it down a size, and re-putting it together. So just know that what you're going to see and what you're going to see in the end is slightly different. So the first thing I did was outlined all of the pieces in chalk, in Taylor's chalk. I prefer Taylor's chalk. A lot of times I am working with fabric that the pens and pencils don't show up on as well. So I tend to default to that. But once I got my pieces cut out, or traced rather, I cut them out, and there really aren't that many pieces. My fabric is folded over, so you see me making 2 copies of the waistband, and actually I am making 4. The front and the back of the waistband, and the front and the back of the facing. And then there's 2 fronts, 2 backs, and 2 pockets that you cut out. And it's fairly straightforward, and the pieces are not too fiddly to work with. I was trying to be lazy and use these small pair of scissors, which I do use to cut fabric and floss for embroidery and cross stitch, and they are very sharp. But the fabric I'm using is actually a cotton canvas, and so while it is a thinner canvas, it is still a very thick, structured material. So I did end up having to get bigger scissors to do all of the cutting because my hand hurt so bad after cutting it out with these little scissors. Hey look, my actual fabric scissors. And so I really loved this fabric. It was super easy to work with. It did fray a little bit, but it was a nice sturdy fabric, but still fairly flexible and took the iron lines really well. Once I had my fabric cut out, I started by putting the pockets in. And there is a lot of French seaming in this pattern, and the pockets are the first place that starts. I did not put my ironing board near my sewing machine because I use it as an excuse to get up and walk around a little bit. For this one, there was so much ironing, I should have put my ironing board much closer to my sewing machine than I did for this. This is the first time I've made pants where the part of the pocket is the side of the pants and not just in the side seam. So this is also the first time that I have installed the pockets first. So it was a little bit of a change of order of operations for me. The pockets are not probably big enough for me to put a cell phone in. And when you sit, the front part kind of pops out, so that would leave whatever you have in your pockets an easy chance to fall out. So I don't know if all the pockets done this style are this way, or if they're just not deep enough pockets for how structured the material is that I am working with, or if that structured material is a part of the issue. So I would have to play around with that a little bit to know for sure. Once the pockets are installed, you put the front two panels together along the crotch seam, sewing a French seam, and you also do the same for the back panels as well. Again, French seamed. And then you will French seam your front panels to your back panel only along one side, because the other side is then going to get the zipper later on. I did in fact press my seams after each step of the French seam. So after the initial seam, I pressed it to be able to cleanly sew the second part of the French seam. And then I pressed everything open nice and neatly. So I did this a lot. Like I said, it was a lot of pressing and a lot of steaming since I was using cotton. Definitely something you have to do along the way. It's not as easy to sew a batch and then iron or steam a batch like you might normally do for seams because of all the French seaming. Hey look, the second seam of this whole project that didn't need to be French seamed. So for the waistband, you put one of the fronts and one of the backs together along the side seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then matching that side seam up with the side seam that you sewed on the shorts, you sew the waistband onto the shorts, again using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then once this is done, I gave everything a really good press before I installed the zipper to make sure that the waistband laid nicely and that the pocket on the side that I was going to apply the zipper to was laying where I wanted it to so that I could pin it appropriately. Because when I noticed that while seaming the other side seam together, that can be a little fiddly to get everything to line up correctly with the waistband, with the pocket, and with the actual pant leg, all needing to line up just right. Now for my least favorite part of the project, the zipper. This is an invisible zipper. I've never really installed one before. I think for me it would have been easier if I had sewed up the side seam first, just normally without French seams, installed the zipper along that side seam, and then opened up the side seam until the end of the zipper. I think it would lay nicer if I had done that. It just was really hard to manage getting everything lined up as you were installing the zipper, because the pocket flaps also have to line up as part of your side seam and not being put in as the side into the side seam. Once the zipper was in now, you put the other two pieces of the waistband together, and then attach them around the top of the shorts so that you could flip it behind and be the facing of the waistband. Once the waistband is installed, you just need to hem the pants. And to do this, I first pressed my hem into them, and then I pressed the fold over so that it's a double rolled hem, so that it was just easier to do the blind seam because I could feel where the seam was because it's double rolled, and because it was all ironed in place. It kind of stayed put in this fabric, so I wasn't worried about not getting a good, even blind hem that also caught all the layers so that it all stayed together. One thing to discuss about the waistband before I show you what the end results look like. In this first pass, I did the finishing by hand by simply whip stitching the bottom of the facing in place, catching only the seam allowances. And this worked just fine, but is a bit of a slow process. The second time I did it, I ironed my facing under so that it would be just longer than the hemline of the outer waistband, so that I could then stitch in the ditch and stitch it blindly. This was not perfect, but it is also the first time I had done the technique, and this was far faster and was actually fairly easy since this was such an easy hemline to follow. Now let's take a look at the final shorts. So I really like the fabric that I chose for these shorts. It is a cotton canvas from Mood, and I can link to it down below in case you're interested. It comes in a lot of colors. And I do like the side zipper. I really like that on the shorts. I like the cleaner front. So I think what I would want to do is make a couple mock-ups of this pattern so that I could get it to fit the way I want to, and then make another pair out of the same canvas because they're really comfortable to wear, but they don't fit as closely from the hips down as I'd like them to, but they fit me the way that they fit on the model in the pattern. And so I think part of my fit problems is I chose a fabric that is meant to be a more jean-like fabric, and the pattern probably needed something a little more flowy for this short so that they fell and draped nicely versus kind of showing how big they are in the leg. But I think those changes will be fairly straightforward for me to make on the pattern itself. And now that I know what waistband size that I need, the rest of the alterations I think are much more straightforward. It's more of tapering the shorts pattern in the leg than it is huge structural adjustments that need to be made, because they fit until they just go straight down the hips. And again, I think these ones are meant for a slightly thinner, drapier fabric than I chose to make them out of. I did end up having to make these shorts twice because I made the mock-up and it was at least 2 sizes too small. So I cut out the size that's 3 sizes up, and before I did that I looked at the waistband, held it up, made sure that it fit, and it looked like it'd be a little big, and I thought I could just take it in the sides, but between the side zipper and the pockets that are built into the side seam and part of the side seam, I didn't have as much room to bring them in as I thought, and so I ended up taking them completely apart, cutting them down a size, and reassembling them. It was actually a really easy pattern to make. I've done it 3 times now. Once for the mock-up, once for the pants that were way too big, and then the shorts that you see here. And it didn't really take more than a few hours to assemble everything, and there are not that many pieces. The hardest part for me was the zipper, and that's just because I'm not really great at zippers. And this is the first time I've used an invisible zipper. So I don't think they turned out bad for that. And of course there's several flaws because I'm new at making shorts and pants in general, and newer to sewing clothing versus items that are not as precise with sizing. And overall, I think they look decent considering it's my first stab. But I will put all of the links to the pattern and the fabric that I used below. And if you have any shorts patterns that you really love that are for a thicker cotton canvas like I used, let me know the maker or manufacturer and the name of the actual shorts pattern, because YouTube does not like links in the comments, so that I can take a look at them and maybe find a pair that is more of what I want without having to make a lot of adjustments to this pattern. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.